Now, I would ask that you turn in your Bibles to Colossians chapter 3, and we will complete our series on the changed heart. But by no means are we done with Colossians chapter 3. We could continue on. As you will see, we've only made it through, I think, verse 15 over the last 5 weeks. But we're going to move now into kind of put a bow on it, because the Apostle Paul has told us everything that we need to know to get the idea. You can continue to read after this, and because there are some certain things, some encouragements that he would want us to have. But I begin my message to you this morning by remembering just a couple of days ago, Fran and I were out with our son, Daniel, for dinner. He lives in New York City, and they don't serve good Tex-Mex up in New York City. So we went out, and we had a wonderful time together, and then I asked for the check, and it never came. And I wondered about this, and I waited 5 minutes or so. The check never came. So I finally tracked down the waiter, and I said, "Hey, what's the deal? Where's the check?" And he said words that I've never heard in 25 years here at Christ Church. Somebody took care of it. I like that. That was an amazing thing. My jaw dropped open. I said, "Who?" And the waiter said, "I don't know." He was just told by some manager, some hostess, or somebody that somebody else had picked up the check. And I wondered, it was just an odd feeling that somebody, unknown to me, would see our family and feel moved to compassion or kindness or love or any of these virtues that we'll talk about in just a moment, and extend themselves in a meaningful way. And what I did after that is I walked through the restaurant looking for one of you. Okay? It could have been anybody. I had no idea. I think that's the vision of the kind of community that the Apostle Paul has in mind in Colossians chapter 3. A kind of community that is focused on exceedingly positive virtues. Now, the last couple weeks we've been very specific, and it's been kind of hard, kind of negative, because the Apostle Paul has been negative with us. He has told us in so many words, don't do this. Put to death these things. Don't do that. Get rid of these things. Stop doing that. Because he is essentially eliminating the negatives, the things that draw us away from a relationship with Jesus Christ. And now he's telling us to put on some things. And that's what we're going to get to today. The positive things that the Apostle Paul wants us to put on. So in your Bibles, page 1167, in verse 12, we read this: "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved." Again, he's telling us who we are before he tells us what to do. And he says, clothe yourselves, and he literally means clothe, to put on these clothes, clothe yourselves with, and then he lists 5 things: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Now, what's interesting to me is anytime, as you've heard me say before, you see a list of things, you have to sort of look at it. What is it trying to do? What's it trying to say? And I just want to go back with you and remember what he said earlier. He said that you must put to death, therefore, in verse 5, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, and then he says 5 things. Look at verse 5. Sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. That's 5 things. And then a little bit later on, he says, you must rid yourself of all such things as these. In verse 8, he says, again, 5. Anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips, just like your mama told you. No bad words. So he says, look, this is the life with Christ. First of all, you must know who you are. You must have the indicative first before the imperative. I want you to know who you are. You have died with him. You've been raised with him. When he comes again, you will appear with him in glory. We have hope. Absolute hope. We have hope. If nothing else, we have hope. And then he says, but first, you must put to death these things that arise out of a broken heart. And you must get rid of these 5 things that rise out of a seed of anger. But now you get to take on these things. As you put to death these things, you get rid of these things. Here are 5 things that you can take on. Let's look at them again. This is the nature of the Christ-like life. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And then for good measure, he throws in 2 more. Forbear with one another, he said. Bear with one another. And then the second one, forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. What I would call, the title of the message, the 7 wonders of the changed heart. 7 virtues that he calls us to take on. Remember what they are. In fact, why don't you read that with me? Starting with compassion. We say together, compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. You see that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 2 more, 6, 7. Now, it's important to understand these virtues require very little explanation, don't they? Compassion, you know what compassion looks like. You know how to extend that to another. You feel with them. You don't look down upon them. You have somebody that's in trouble. You don't point the bony finger of shame or guilt at them, but you come alongside them and you say, look, brother, sister, whatever trouble you've been in, I'm with you in there. I'm not in trouble with you, but I'm walking alongside of you. Kindness, well, you just look for what, remember President Bush called random acts of kindness. Well, these aren't random acts. These are specific acts. I'm going to specifically be kind in all of my dealings. The world is so much against this kind of behavior. The world is uncompassionate. It is unkind. It lacks in humility. All the things that are the virtues of the Christian life, the world stands against. We know this. What we know here is Paul is saying, become like Christ. These 7 virtues, they're all found in Jesus Christ. Compassion, kindness, humility, patience, gentleness, forbearance, forgiving. Those are all found in Jesus Christ. I live with an artist, and I've seen her paint. It's extraordinary. She just did something this last week. She takes a picture of what she wants to paint and puts it where she can see it. And then, little by little, color by color, she lays down layers so that it actually doesn't take shape till it finally comes together. What the Apostle Paul is doing here is he's laying down the layers of the life of Jesus. He's saying, compassion. Who does he have in mind? Kindness, humility. What person is he asking us to model ourselves over? There's a great little story I read this last week about George Bernard Shaw, the playwright, and Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of England. It's a great little story. The playwright, and there was this antagonism between the two. It was playful, but it was still antagonistic. And so George Bernard Shaw writes Winston Churchill a letter. He had an opening, a play that was going to open, and he wanted to invite the Prime Minister. So he writes some words to this effect. Dear Prime Minister, I'm enclosing 2 tickets to come to the opening evening of my play. Invite a friend if you have one. Okay, invite a friend if you have one. Well, if you know Winston Churchill, he's very quick. He writes back and he says, Dear Mr. Shaw, I cannot come to the opening of your play. Please send 2 tickets for the second night if you have one. Paul says, look, be kind to one another. Show humility. Essentially, what Paul is saying is become like Christ.
We thank you for joining us online. The ministries of Christ Church Plano are made possible by generous contributions from our members and viewers. If you have found this sermon meaningful and would like to make a gift of support, please visit christchurchplano.org/give. Thank you.